So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the BADFA Research Subcommittee, How to Design a Research Poster workshop. It will be hosted this evening by myself, Martha, a member of the Research Subcommittee. And thank you so much to our presenters, Amy Diggy and Ellie Keeler, who are going to present a little bit about their posters this evening. So just to tell you a little bit more about our presenters, I won't read out the whole bio, you can have a little look yourself. But Ellie Keeler is a drama therapist. She's also a member of the research subcommittee and is currently doing her Bart's charity funded doctoral research at Queen Mary University of London, looking at the active ingredients of drama therapy with children and young people with emotional distress. So Ellie will be presenting first, and I'll just tell you a little bit about Amy, and then I'll kind of reintroduce her again after Ellie has presented. So Amy Diggy is a postdoctoral researcher at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in Baltimore, USA, and we thought it would be great to bring Amy in as a non-drama therapist, just to show us a little bit of a cross-discipline working, thinking about posters outside of our field, but obviously we can learn a lot from Amy as well. So thank you so much for joining us. So now I'm going to hand back over to Ellie, who's going to start with her presentation, if I can find my mouse to stop sharing my screen. So Ellie, would you like to share and go ahead and present your poster for us?
Sure, thank you very much. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Marissa. And thank you everyone who's joined tonight and will join and watch the webinar in future. I'm just going to talk to you for maybe the next 15-20 minutes about creating and presenting scientific posters in drama therapy. And I use the word scientific fairly loosely. Scientific posters are just a particular kind of poster, but actually drama therapy, with our arts background, we are scientific as well, but with our arts background and with our kind of artistic input can learn a lot from posters and can contribute a lot to making posters. I'll whiz through this just to say, yes, as Marissa said, I'm a drama therapist. I qualified in 2021 from Anglia Ruskin, and Marissa's already spoke about my research. But what I really do want to draw attention to is that as a member of the research subcommittee, we're really passionate about fostering research capacity in our profession, and we know that there's ability within our profession to do research, to do things like making posters. So I'm really pleased we're able to have this webinar and this session tonight. Okay, so what is a scientific poster? Well, a scientific poster is also known as a research poster or an academic poster. And as I mentioned, I know we have that really artistic element of drama therapy. It's a really great way to present research in a visual way. So I love this quote here. It's really simple. The purpose of a research poster is to visually represent the general overview, data, and most relevant findings of a research project. But I think for drama therapy, that doesn't necessarily have to be a research project. It could be your ideas, your theories, your experience of working with a particular creative kind of output, and you can share that with your colleagues via a poster. And I also like this. It might be sort of a good way to understand an academic poster as a hybrid between a spoken presentation and a written journal article. And quite often a poster at a conference will come with an oral presentation that's maybe about 10 to 15 minutes long. So I'm going to share an example of a poster that I've created before, but I just want to say before I do, this poster is for a very specific kind of study. So this poster was for a systematic review, and a systematic review looks across a number of different studies and aggregates findings to see what we can learn sort of from the sum of all their parts. So if it doesn't kind of land with the work you might be doing, don't worry, this is a very specific type of research. So what does a poster do? Well, hopefully it guides the reader visually and in brief, although you might not think it from my poster, around the study. And just a note to say, my poster could have been a lot more brief. It's quite text heavy, but I was very short on time when creating it, so I did a lot of copying and pasting from the kind of written paper. So yeah, just note that you could have a lot less text than this. So I thought it would be a good idea to sort of go around the poster and talk about the elements that are in there, both for this specific kind of research, but also what elements might make up a poster that you could make about drama therapy. So you need the title, you need the authors, and you need logos of funders or institutions as well. They're quite standard things that should be on all posters. You might also have contact details. I would recommend that, especially if you're presenting at a conference or if you won't always be sort of alongside the poster as it is shared. It's always a good idea to have background. This is kind of, think of this as your introduction. So telling the reader or telling the person looking at your poster what your poster is about, where it fits in the literature, and also make a case for the poster that you're presenting. You know, why have you created it? What can it add? What will the reader get, or what will the viewer get from looking at your poster today? You don't need to read the text in that. It's a good idea to have a method section, and I think it's quite it's much easier to think about methods in the sense of a research project, but that actually might just be if you're writing up your experience of working with a client. You might say, we met in a community centre for 10 weeks for 1 hour at a time, etc., etc. So mine is very specific to the study that took place. It's sort of how we did what we did. It's how did we collect the data and how did we analyse the data. But it doesn't necessarily have to have that structure. Just talk about what you've done to create this poster. I think it's a really good idea to have the aims of your poster written somewhere. So they may take the form of research questions if it is about a study that you've done, but it also may just be sort of what you're seeking to communicate or what you're seeking for the reader or viewer to find out from your poster today. So for me, I understood it as what did I want to know when I did my study, and what questions am I answering with my poster? My poster is very text heavy. I'll put my hands up and admit that, but it is a really good idea to have figures and images on your poster. Having pictures or graphs as in mind to really draw the eye of the viewer into your poster is a good idea. So again, mine's a very specific figure. It's a Prisma flow diagram, which is sort of how you, it communicates to the reader how you selected the papers for your systematic review. But yours might be an artistic output of a session, a photograph of some work, or it might be a graph that you've made. Okay, so somewhere on your poster you should have the results. So the kind of headline findings of whatever it is you wanted to find out. And mine for this paper, I had 3 research questions, and the first 2 were relevant to each other. So they were grouped together in that box there. And as you can see, I've used graphs to sort of visually communicate some of my findings, but I've also narratively summarized. So if someone's eye is just drawn to the text, they can get something from that. But if someone's eye is drawn to those figures, they can also understand what we found there. So my third research question was just a very narrative summary of what we found. So again, not super engaging, and it would have been great to have this in a more visually appealing way, but I was very time poor. You might have some study specific information on your poster as well, and I won't dwell too much on this because this again was very specific, but again, more images, more figures, really draw the eye of your reader into that poster if you can. Always good to have a conclusion. So really to summarize, I've got reaffirm the need for this poster. So why did you do it? What's the purpose? Recap what you found. This is really, really brief, just a couple of sentences. And then what do these findings mean to the field? What do they mean to drama therapy, or what do they mean to your setting or your service, for example, or what do they mean to your client? And I just want to say this, some people, probably myself included sometimes, will only read the conclusion of your poster. And that's okay, but we have to make it okay. We have to make sure that the conclusion really stands alone and communicates something really valuable to the reader. A good idea to have references as well if you've made references throughout your poster. Mine are really, really tiny, and I would say that it's probably okay to have them in such small text because it will be printed so large, and because someone only really, really needs to look at the references. Well, maybe they don't often. Okay, so that's kind of a quick, I suppose, zip around my poster. I wanted to talk to you about the aims and the purposes of the poster. So why did I make this poster? Well, this poster was made for an online conference poster sharing session with the Council for Allied Health Professions Research. And I suppose that meant that I had a very specific audience and a very specific way of delivering the poster. So I didn't expect people to sort of walk up to the poster and read it in the moment, but I did want to inspire people to follow up and read the poster, or to follow up and read the study to which it relates to. And whilst it was created for that reason, loads and loads of kind of times that I've needed a poster have cropped up since. So for example, this session tonight, or other conferences that I've attended. So always good to sort of have a poster in your pocket if you can. Who are the audience of my poster? So I mentioned it was for the Council for Allied Health Professions Research. So the audience were primarily allied health professionals, but also I had other drama therapists, other academics, my academic supervisors, and the attendees of other conferences in mind when I made that poster. So always good to kind of think about the accessibility of your language, especially if people from outside of our profession might be reading and looking at these posters. Or indeed if clients or service users or your audience as well, really hold in mind the vocabulary that is accessible. How did I decide what I wanted in the poster? I've just taken you sort of around all of those key elements. And for me, it was fairly easy because it was structured in the same way as the paper that I had written. And it kind of needed to be structured in that way for the kind of poster that it was. But this diagram here, I've just taken from the internet, and there are loads and loads of different ideas for the ways you can sort of structure and what you can include in your poster. I would really say that think about what is visually appealing. What can you communicate with images, with graphs, because that really, no one wants to look at mine, which is full of text. Thinking about laying out the poster, the way I laid out the poster was really due to space limitations and thinking practically about the way that the audience member might read through the poster, the way that I goes across that poster. So this is sort of the intended way that I hope that the audience's eye moves across my poster, and it's the way mine does. But I was also sure to make it so it kind of worked if you went that way, or worked if you went that way as well. So whilst I don't think that's the best way, it's a good idea to kind of have a few different ways in mind for the person to read their way around it. Just some tips on formatting, really, that I found both from my experience and from Googling as well. Use boxes to group related information. So you can probably see from my post, there are very specific components that I want people to read kind of grouped together. Use contrasting colours. And this is both for ease of reading, but again, I think to differentiate sort of what relates to what within the poster. Group things together, put things in boxes. You know, I wanted to communicate that those pie charts there were related to the text below. And if I hadn't used boxes and contrasting colours, I think that would be more difficult to do. Make use of headings. That one's probably fairly obvious, but use headings where you can so people know exactly what they're looking at. And if they skip straight to the conclusion, they know exactly where that is. And use the same font if you can. And I say this just for sort of professional readability, I would say. You can use different size font, but I think using lots of different fonts throughout can make it look quite messy and difficult or kind of taxing to read. So how did I make this poster? Well, I personally used Canva, and I know Amy's going to share a different way of making posters this evening. So Canva is an online digital design program. I personally find it really sort of user-friendly, and they have lots and lots of templates. So to make this poster, I worked from a template that sort of existed already and changed colours and shapes and things like that. So I won't take you to Canva today because I think it is better for someone to sort of work their own way around it. But in sort of 10 or 20 minutes, I think you can probably develop skills that kind of give you the comfortability enough to make a scientific poster. And you can see I've just popped in the search bar there, scientific poster. And if you search that, tons of templates will come up that you can use. There are other programs, and I should say Canva, a kind of small version of Canva is free, but if you want sort of to add certain images or use certain shapes, there is a paid for version. It isn't very expensive, and you can pay for 1 month at a time. So if you know you've got sort of one design project this month, or you can squeeze a few more in, it's sometimes worth it. There are other programs, some of which are free or some of which you might have access to through work or your education setting. There's Microsoft PowerPoint, and I know Google Slides, which is well related, but Amy's going to go through that in more detail. You can also use Microsoft Word, Microsoft Publisher, or the Adobe Suite. I have not used the Adobe Suite, and I know it's quite tricky to get on with, but if you're very techie, that's a really, really good program to use as well. So just some practical things. When you go to a conference, or if you go to a conference with your poster, they're typically printed on A1. So it's a huge piece of paper, 60 inches by 85 inches nearly. And they kind of come rolled up in a tube and you have to carry them very carefully. So when you design your poster, be sure to design it in A1. It can always be shrunk, but it's actually quite hard to kind of make a text or an image file bigger. Save it in as many different formats as you can, so PDF, JPEG, PNG, but also keep the editable format. So you can make amendments. You might be reading through it and spot that spelling mistake, or something might change and you want to change your results. So make sure you keep that editable file as well. Use bullet points and headers, I've mentioned those. And then boxes, shapes and graphics as well, just remember those when you come to making your poster. You don't want it to look like a sort of A4 text document. And then one thing I didn't do on my poster is include my contact details, and that's something I should go back really and add. Yeah, that's everything for practical things. I know Amy's got some more hot tips that she'll share with you as well. So I wanted to briefly share some ideas that we could kind of apply to posters in drama therapy. So mine was very much related to a study that I was doing, but posters don't have to be necessarily related to sort of studies that are happening on the field. We might make posters on the use of creative drama therapy methods. So are you using story in a really creative way? Are you using metaphor and you want to share the metaphors that have come up in your practice recently? You might make a visual presentation of drama therapeutic theory. Are you working with the hero's journey and you want thinking about that arrow as it goes around the paper I made? I imagine that a poster could be made that really beautifully represents the hero's journey in therapy sessions. You might be working in a service that's conducting a service evaluation, and you might have some quantitative data, you might have some qualitative data that you can share, or it might be the plan to conduct some service evaluation as well. You might share your methods or the results of doing CPD. Have you had a learning experience that you think you can share with other drama therapists at the conference? And then actually you might have many more ideas than I have, and you can actually make a poster on anything at all. I think the more posters we can make about drama therapy, the more we can get our messages out there, the better. I just wanted to quickly share this poster that I made along with other colleagues in my work setting. And this is a post that doesn't really share the results of a study per se, but shares and communicates kind of the scope of research that's happening in the office where I'm based. So these are all the arts therapists who are researching in my area. And we've presented this at a few conferences just to kind of say, hey, we're here, we're researching, this is what we're doing, this is how you can contact us if you're interested. So that one again is quite visually, I'd say, appealing, and that one was made from a template on Canva as well. So I think Marissa's going to mention this, but I just wanted to share from the research subcommittee's perspective, what is our big idea? And working with the BADFA conference committee, we'd really love for people to create and share posters for sharing at the conference this September. If you make a poster, it will be shared, and we can find space for it. We can have a poster sharing session, and I think it'll be a really great thing to really encourage people to do. So we're here for more questions. We hope this workshops and what Amy shares as well is going to really encourage people to create and present posters. It will be in a really relaxed manner, so I'd say hopefully no need to worry or stress about presenting a poster. Your colleagues will just want to hear about what's in there, what you're working on, what you're sharing. And it's a really great way to get some conference presenting experience onto your CV as well. That is everything from me. I can probably hand back over to Marissa and then to Amy as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Ellie. That was really interesting and really inspiring, I think. And I'm just thinking to all the times that I've been in a drama therapy role in a school, for example, and been called, the drama teacher or, something like that. And it would be really interesting to create a poster to put in the work environment to show people what drama therapy is about, for example. So yeah, thank you so much. So now we're going to hand over to Amy. Thank you so much, Amy. And just to say, she is making the effort to join us all the way from America. So really thrilled to have you here. So if you would like to share your screen and present your poster to us, it would be great to hear a little bit about posters from a different discipline. So thank you.
Yeah, sure. Can everybody see that okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so hopefully the format hasn't gone weird on this. I saved it as a PowerPoint from Google Slides, which sometimes goes a bit weird, but so I won't spend too much on my background because Marissa already did a great job of introducing me, but just to say some context for the poster that I'm going to present, I won't go through the actual information in the poster, but I work on zoonotic diseases, so that's diseases that can spread between different species. So like, for example, bird flu, that could spread from birds to lots of different animals. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in my poster, is some of my PhD work, which focused on this virus, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, which is another coronavirus, kind of like the one that causes COVID, but it spreads from camels to people. So that's what the poster's about, but you don't have to worry too much about the ins and outs of it. I don't know much about drama therapy at all, so it's really interesting to hear Ellie's presentation, and I hope I can add an example of how posters are used in the wider scientific community. I'm sure there'll be some things that are less applicable that I talk about, but also hopefully some things that are more generalizable across both of our fields. So firstly, I'm a full-time researcher. And immediately when I think of research, I think about like study design, or like recruiting participants, or collecting and analyzing data. But actually what I spend most of my time doing is communicating, or thinking about how to communicate my research, whether it's through posters at conferences, or through talks, or putting together manuscripts to try and publish work in scientific journals. And I would say that the communicating research is just as important as conducting it, if not more, because that's the point at which it starts adding knowledge or experience to the field, and going beyond you learning from your own research and actually taking it back to, if you had participants in your study, those people or other researchers in your field and the wider community. So just to give you an idea of what context I normally present posters in, these kind of hectic looking poster sessions at conferences that tend to be quite big for in my field. So you're given this board, and at the beginning of the day you go and put your poster on there, and so throughout the day people can come and look at it. So it's good for the poster to be able to stand on its own and be able to be understood by people even if you're not there, but also there'll be a dedicated poster session where you stand by your poster and people come past, and you can interact with them and they can ask questions about your poster. So I think posters offer some really great opportunities as a form of communicating your work. And one of those is that, unlike if you're giving a talk or if you're writing a paper, it's an opportunity to have a one-to-one or small group interaction with your audience, where you can tailor what you're saying to their specific background, and they can ask you direct questions, which I really like. And it also, because it has to be quite succinct, it's quite a good, useful, reflective process to think about if you've done a piece of research, or if you're talking about your work more generally, like what's the main messages that you're trying to get across, and that process I find quite helpful. And then there are also some challenges. So in my case, in these big poster sessions, depending on whether like people know you and seek you out sometimes at the poster session, or they've read what you're doing, so they'll come to deliberately try and find out what your post is about. But often you'll have to try and engage people who are just walking past, and you need something to tell them that your post is interesting, but also that it's not going to be too taxing. It's going to be easy to digest and easy for them to get an insight into what you're working on. So for the rest of my presentation, I'm just going to go through the steps that I take in making a research poster, focusing mainly on designing the poster, and then looking at how I choose the content and layout, before touching on creating the poster, and then printing and presenting the poster. So I won't spend too long on this because Ellie did a great job of going over the components of your typical research poster. But having this kind of layout where you have these different sections, like a background or introduction, methods, a what you've done, and results or key messages you want to communicate, is a really nice way of having a clear narrative that people can work through themselves when they look at your poster. I also like this kind of setup, which has become more popular in my field recently, which people have a main finding or a main message they want to give people, taking up the majority of the poster, which really leaves people with no doubt about what you're trying to communicate and what your work is about. And then they can look into these downsides. There's still all that information about the kind of intro, the rationale for the poster and the methods and results. Once you've hooked people in, which for me, presenting in those kind of big poster sessions, I think is very appealing to kind of be able to engage people from the start. So when I'm designing a poster, I generally start by thinking about 3 things. So firstly, who I'm aiming to share my research with. So whether it's for primarily to communicate with other researchers in my field, public health practitioners, or potential funders of my future work, or policymakers. And depending on that, what will get their attention? What are they familiar with? Are they familiar with the methods I'm using, or like the rationale for the problem that I'm talking about, or will I need to put a bit more time into explaining those things? And then secondly, what do I want those people to take away in terms of my main findings and the potential implications? And what do I want from those people? Do I want guidance or constructive criticism about what I've done? Do I want to kind of just be able to tell them succinctly the results of my research, whether it could impact their potential policies, or whether it could potentially lead to funding for more research, and that will all impact what I choose in terms of content and layout poster. So this is an example of the most recent poster I presented. So the aim of this poster, it was for a big epidemiology conference, which kind of like the Burning Man festival of epidemiology. Like it's way too many people, way too many posters. So I really wanted my key findings to be the first thing that people see when they see the poster. So hopefully that's what you see first, this orange box here, and maybe the camels, which is also a good hook for getting people who work on camels. If you see a camel, you know you're going to be interested in the poster. And so that really influenced the reason I chose this layout, because I knew it was going to be in one of those very busy sessions. And I do think in general that having your key findings or messages that like in a really kind of eye-catching layout is quite good for immediately communicating to people what your work is about, but you can also do that with the title. And what I've done here in this section is I have these key findings that I wanted to communicate to both researchers in my field, but also policymakers who are working on trying to decide whether to vaccinate camels against this disease. And then I have in these white boxes within this box more information and figures for people to either read on their own, or for me to go through with people once they've already been engaged by the poster, by the kind of the 3 key findings. So aside from that section, the other sections I've got, so I've included this, which is like the introduction, or that explaining the problem that the poster is addressing. And because I had in mind that I wanted to present this to, I wanted to communicate this to researchers in my field who might use similar methods to me, but not be familiar with this virus. I wanted a very kind of clear, brief overview of the problem that they could digest really quickly by looking at this figure and saying, okay, this is a problem of transmission of this virus from camels to humans, and then read the text and get the general gist of the rationale for the work. And then I have this approach section, which is like the methods that I used. And my aim and thoughts with including this was that I wanted to not only be able to convey to the researchers who are going to be familiar with the methods what I did, so that they could have enough information to criticize and kind of give me feedback and help me improve my research, but also to not overwhelm the policymakers who I wanted to interact with my poster, who wouldn't have any familiarity with mathematical modelling, and I didn't want them to feel alienated and like they wouldn't be able to understand what I'd done. So it's kind of balancing those two things of what information to include and what to, you can also, if you're presenting to different people with different feedback and different background knowledge, you can also tailor what you're saying if you're there with your poster as well. Aside from those, I have my contact details, like Ellie said, and then I have this this title that you can go to kind of see an overview of what was this project about. So that's a very specific example of a poster that's very specific to me and my aims. But I think when I think about other posters in my field and what I think makes them well designed, the common things are a clear hook to grab people's attention, and the topic of your research or your poster is immediately clear, and the way you've laid it out kind of tells a story that people can follow without too much work on their part, in addition to your contact details for like follow-up conversations. And in general, in terms of content, short sentences and diagrams and figures just looks like it will be easier for people if they are time pressed or kind of bombarded in information, like they tend to be when I present posters, are more attractive to people. So in terms of actually creating your poster, I tend to use PowerPoint. If you haven't used PowerPoint before, this is what it looks like when you open it, and you get one slide. You can add more if you're making a slideshow, but for the poster, you make it all on one slide. And what you do first, which is what I like about it and why I generally use PowerPoint, although Canva looks really good and I'm going to try it the next time I make a poster, is you can set the exact size of this slide to be the real life size of your poster. So if you wanted it A1, you could look up the dimensions of A1, and then you would go to the design tab at the top there, and then the slide size button there. Then if you click custom, you can then put in the width and height of the size of the poster that you want. Click OK, and then that will be the size of that slide. Then you know that if you're using size 24 font, you know that when it's printed A1, that font is going to be size 24, which some conferences I go to, they'll give you a font that they want the posters to be, you want the font to be above 24, so they know people can read it or something like that. And so that's really helpful for me to know that I have actually got the correct font size, because I've been able to align the size like that. And then the next step with PowerPoint is, if you use this insert tab, you can insert any figures you've got saved on your computer, as well as text boxes and shapes to kind of divide up the poster. And that's what I tend to do. Then once you've created your poster, when it comes to printing, most people print their posters professionally. So because not many people have a printer that big, and you want the quality to be really crisp for when it's printed out large. They do tend to be like, they can be a bit expensive, so you want to definitely compare a few different printers in your area and make sure that you're really happy with it before you send it to print the first time, because you won't want to do it again. I know from experience. And I've got a couple of other hot tips from colleagues about printing. So even though on your screen an image can look like it's clear. Once it's printed out really big, sometimes if it was a low resolution image, it can then look quite blurry. So most printing services suggest you want your images to be around 300 dots per inch. So if you go on your figure where it is in your computer and right click and look at the properties, you can see what resolution the figures are. And if they're really much lower than 300, then maybe you might want to consider getting a better quality figure, or saving a better quality figure. And then secondly, if you're traveling quite far to present your poster, sometimes then you'll have to pay for the poster tube to be on a plane, or you might leave it somewhere. And so some of my colleagues get their posters printed on fabric, and then you can just roll it up in your bag. And one of my colleagues even makes them into like cushion covers afterwards. Obviously you don't have to do, but that can be a good tip if you're traveling quite far and the poster tube would be inconvenient. And then finally, once you've printed your poster, just leaves presenting it. And I think my main tips for that would be to practice a 3-minute maybe pitch of walking people through your poster, unless at the conference you're asked to present for longer. But if you have that pitch in mind, it helps me feel prepared, and also it can also help during the creation of the poster, actually laying out the content, if you're practicing kind of thinking about how you would talk through it. And you can then move into any discussion and comments and questions with the specific people who've come to look at your poster after that. I think secondly, listening to your audience and making the most of that unique opportunity a poster offers to interact one-on-one compared to other forms of like scientific communication. Listening to their area of expertise and their background so that you can tailor what you discuss. And learn the most from them, as well as like optimizing how you talk about your work with them. And also just being flexible. So even if you've prepared this pitch, if you then realize somebody has more of a background in a different area, or they know a lot about what you're doing, you can vary the time you spend talking on the different parts of your poster so that you can really tailor it to them. And that was all I had. So I hope that there's some things that you feel can be translated into the uses of posters for drama therapy. And I wish you all the best for creating your posters. I also have a couple of resources here that I found useful on poster making, including some PowerPoint templates. So maybe we can share these slides afterwards, but they're there if you want to look at them.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Amy. And I think turning our posters into cushion covers is very drama therapy. So absolutely perfect example. If anyone does want help with their posters as well, then absolutely they can contact the research subcommittee just by emailing research@badtha.org.uk. And we do have a direct link to Amy Diggy. So if anyone wants to ask her any questions or needs support from her too.